This is Max Headroom, and what you're about to witness is one of the greatest epics ever produced in the history of television. So,
sit back,
relax,
and enjoy.
Max Headroom, the pop icon enigma of the late 80s who was literally everywhere. Not only was he a pop culture juggernaut, but also a behemoth when it came to marketing as well, as he would be the spokesperson for the new Coca-Cola, simply called Coke, which was a new line of soda that Coca-Cola launched in 1985.
And everybody hated it.
But they had no problem with Max Headroom, and these adverts would make the character even more popular. So people hated the product but loved the spokesman, and the soda would eventually be discontinued in 1980. What? In 2002? I had no idea it lasted that long. Oh well. Max Headroom was a big deal, and he would have merchandise galore, mainly tied to Coke, but still, he was everywhere and on everything. Lunchboxes, notebooks, t-shirts, not to mention he would be on pretty much every billboard you would see. But why? Why did this character become so popular? Where did he come from? How did it all start? Well, it all started in the UK on BBC's Channel 4 with their miniseries entitled Max Headroom, 20 Minutes into the Future, which first aired in 1985. And this would prove to be somewhat of an origin story because the Max Headroom character would go on to host his own BBC television show, The Max Headroom Show, where he was what they call a VJ, where he introduced and talked about music videos and even had some interviews. And the rest, they say, is history. Max Headroom was a big hit, and it pretty much took off from there. And the miniseries in which the Max Headroom character was based on was immensely popular as well. So popular that Karl-Lorimar Home Video would condense the miniseries into an hour-long movie and release it on VHS in the US in 1986, simply called Max Headroom, the original story, which is the exact distribution that I got my big meaty claws on. And I decided to pop this bad boy in and give it a watch for the first time since I was 8. The last time I had seen this was 1988, and I really had no memory of it, other than not really liking it and being a little bit afraid of it, and perhaps I just did not understand it. Because the conundrum here is that the Max Headroom character was a completely different entity than the Max Headroom movie. Max Headroom became a character that was a beloved spokesman who was appealing to everyone, especially kids. He was fun and quirky, an embodiment of the high spirits of the late 80s. As a kid, you loved him, and if you went to a video store and saw that they had the Max Headroom movie, you naturally would want to rent it. And rent it is exactly what my family did. We all watched it, and I had no idea what I was seeing. The Max Headroom character, in which we all saw in commercials, was one thing, and this movie was another. It's apples and oranges here, and though it's an origin story, this movie doesn't really have much to do with Max Headroom. And upon viewing this again for the first time in a long time, I gotta say, I was pretty impressed. I also gotta say, I totally understand why kids did not get this. But it wasn't made for kids. The Max Headroom character just happened to be appealing to that demographic. That popularity was circumstantial, and this movie is what it is. Though it never really specifies it takes place in a distant dystopian future. Lots of grim imagery, ominous landscapes, dark undertones, interesting characters. Man, nobody did dystopian movies quite like the 80s did. And this is most certainly that. Basically, it's a science fiction movie, and don't let anyone tell you it's a comedy. The picture of Max Headroom that late 80s media painted for us was vastly different than where he actually came from. And it's weird to me that such a beloved 80s marketing icon came from a dystopian movie. And back to Max Headroom inadvertently being a marketing icon that was appealing to kids, I'm going to draw a similarity here between the Max Headroom movie and 1985's Dr. Otto and the Riddle of the Gloom Beam. Not that these two movies in and of themselves are very similar to each other, but that's not exactly what I mean. Even though both movies do have some pretty grim and rather disturbing imagery, some pretty dark undertones, but Dr. Otto isn't a dystopian movie. Well, it doesn't start off as one, but spoiler alert, it ends up as one. But that's not really what I'm talking about. The similarities I'm drawing here are how the movies were handled marketing-wise. As you know, Dr. Otto stars Jim Varney, and as you also know, Jim Varney was most famous for portraying portraying the character Ernest, another beloved marketing icon of the 80s. Much like Max Headroom, the Ernest character inadvertently became appealing to kids. Even though the character was typically enjoyed by everyone, kids were especially drawn to it. There are parallels between Max Headroom and Ernest P. Worrell, and this is most certainly true with both of their movies. Now, I know what you're saying, Dr. Otto is not an Ernest movie, and if you're not saying that, you should be saying that because Dr. Otto is not an Ernest movie. But it was marketed as though it is an Ernest movie. Granted, Dr. Otto in The Riddle of the Gloom Beam is the Ernest character's theatrical debut, but he's only in the movie for less than 3 minutes. And this film was pushed as though it were a complete and total Ernest movie. And if you were a kid that happened to like Ernest, you would want to watch it just based on that. And therefore, you would watch the movie and have no idea what was going on, and you might even be a little bit terrified of it. Much like the Max Headroom movie. And like the Max Headroom movie, it wasn't made for kids, but it also wasn't not made for kids, if you know what I mean? Meaning that kids could watch it, they just more than likely wouldn't understand it like I didn't. I mean, come on, they had to market these movies, they had to sell them somehow, and it's only circumstantial that kids happen to like these characters. And it's nobody's fault that these characters are in really weird movies.
And now, back to the VHS.
This charming 1986 Karl-Lorimar Home video distribution of Max Headroom is the one and only US VHS release. To the surprise of absolutely no one, its life on VHS ended here, making this tape even more special. And it even has a neat little fold-out display on the sleeve, which was quite a unique thing back in 1986, and it's a neat little feature.
Oh, it's like a book.
Yeah, it's like a book. Anyways, trying to find this tape today isn't exactly easy, but it's also not difficult. That doesn't make any sense. There aren't that many listings for it, and they do go for some pretty mid-tier pricing, and I guarantee you will never find this in a thrift store. But if you do, hey, good work.
Oh, good for you.
Now, it's worth mentioning here, and I'm not sure when I'm going to be talking about them again, but Karl-Lorimar Home Video was a pretty big heavy hitter when it came to 1980s video distribution. Yeah, they were sort of like the captains of the B-list of home video distribution, right up there with media home entertainment. And you more than likely have watched at least one of their VHS releases in your lifetime, and maybe you even have at least one of their releases in your VHS collection and not even know it. And this would probably be because throughout the 80s, the company went through about a half a handful of name changes. When the company was founded in 1981, they went by Karl Video, or KVC, which I guess stands for Karl Video Company. And within the following 4 years, they would remain Karl Video, but go through a number of different logo changes. And in the latter part of 84 and well into 85, they would go by Karl Home Video, which, I mean, isn't much different than just Karl Video, but whatever. And in the tail end of 85, they would acquire the name that most people would know them by, if they know them at all, Karl-Lorimar Home Video. And then in 1986, they decided to get a little kinky and change their name to KLV TV. And this was a gimmick that was supposed to be like, it's a television station, but you program the television station because you watch their videos and determine what is programmed on the television station, so you're like the TV programmer for it. I don't know, man, it was a weird idea. It was a little too out there and didn't last very long because in 87, they went back to Karl-Lorimar Home Video. But drama was right around the corner in 87 because sometime in that year, Karl and Lauramar had a big fight and Karl stormed out. Not unlike Rick Martel leaving Strikeforce, or at least that's how it is in my mind. From then on, they would go by Lauramar Home Video until 1989 when they were bought out by Telepictures Communications, who later on would subsequently be bought out by Warner Brothers. It's a timeline that's a little bit more complicated than it should be, but interesting nonetheless. At least I think it is, and you should think so too. So Karl-Lorimar Home Video, or whatever you want to call it, is quite literally a 1980s video distributor because it was born, lived, and died within that very decade. Doesn't get much more 80s than that. This 1986 Max Headroom VHS is a Karl-Lorimar distribution under the KLV TV moniker. So it's a Karl-Lorimar Home Video distribution, even though it doesn't look like it is. Which is one of the problems with name changes. I mean, you're trying to build your company through recognition. That's a little hard to do when you keep changing your name. Karl-Lorimar Home Video made many names for themselves, literally and figuratively, by releasing many neato movies, like not only Max Headroom, but also Maximum Overdrive. This Max Headroom VHS release is cool because it also includes a video video contest, which was a pretty big thing back in the 80s. They were a great way to promote videos because these contests typically involved you writing down answers to questions pertaining to whatever video. They lured you into watching the video with the promise of prizes. You would write down the answers on a postcard, mail it in, and maybe you would win. But I don't know if anyone ever did. The Max Headroom VHS includes Max Headroom himself not only introducing the video, but then explaining the rules and asking the questions after the video. It was unique. It was footage that you would only find on this VHS. It was a nice touch, and me, being the great guy that I am, have compiled this footage, which will be shown immediately following this broadcast. It's pretty awesome, very dated, and worth a watch. So how about you? Did you enter this contest? Did you win anything? Let me know in the comments below. In closing, Max Headroom is a movie that I'm glad I gave another chance, because when I saw this when I was a kid, I just did not get this. It's an interesting and different movie, especially if you're into 1980s dystopian disturbia. The story is very well done and flows very smoothly. It's very easy to watch. The production's pretty damn good. Now, it's not some over-the-top special effects extravaganza, but this movie does what it does very well. It's a dystopian movie that never really highlights that it is one. It's a rather grim and interesting subversive hit piece about the influence of corporate media. How we got a Coca-Cola spokesman and a pop culture icon out of it, I'll never know. And the best part is, it's only an hour long. Man, do I hate long movies. If you haven't seen this, check it out. It's definitely worth a watch. Good luck finding the VHS, and be prepared to drop a little coin on it. Thank you very much for watching this little video. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to hit subscribe and share this shit. Take care out there, and I'll see you next time only on Captain Adams VHS Pirate Ship.
This is Max Headroom, and what you're about to witness is one of the most sinister-sounding intros to a trailer to one of the greatest epics ever produced in the history of television. And there's more, because you are going to see it as well.
Yes, it.
Yes, it. Yes, namely, the Max Headroom story. And afterwards, that is, directly following, I want to talk to you about something even bigger, namely, the Karl-Lorimar Max Headroom Sweepstakes. So,
sit back,
relax,
and enjoy.
my film. Well, if that hasn't got Oscar written all over it, I'll eat my invitation to the award ceremony. But, let's move on to the biggie. Yes, the Karl-Lorimar Sweepstakes. And here's how it works. I'm going to ask you 4 questions about the film you've just seen. 4 questions. They're not difficult, but being able to count to 4 helps. Ready? Good. What is a rebus? A rebus. Name the doctor who has his own video symptom show. During one of my early broadcasts in the film, I made a little joke about Eskimos. That's been very lucky for me. I said, I said, don't Eskimos ever get tired of their blank? Can you remember what it was? How many combinations might Theora have had to try to break the code in the computer-generated cyberspace matrix of Bryce's studio?
Or to you ordinary people.
His door lock code. Okay, no cheating. No peering over someone else's TV set. Just write down your answers on a postcard or a 3 by 5 inch card and send it to this address. And here are the rules of the competition. And don't forget, entries must be received by the 31st of December, 1986. Okay, so while you read these rules, here are some of my own rules on television behavior. Rule 1. Don't sit right up close to the TV set so other people can't see. It's rude. It's rude. Rule 2. Don't squint at the screen. It's bad for your eyes. Rule 3. If you don't sit up close to the set and squint at the screen, you'll never read these rules. Okay, now for the prizes. And yes, for third prize, 1,000 Max Headroom posters. That's one each, of course, and they're great. You can stick them on your wall, or if you feel really silly, you can roll them up and make rude noises down them. And for the second prize, 100 people will get a Max Headroom t-shirt that's no double dry, wash and wear, non-shrink, dry, flat iron, flat color, fast, no dry clean, 100% cotton. Cotton. Wonderful to wear. Just don't leave the label sticking out. And what's for first prize? Oh, look at that. You cannot beat that for a first prize. Well, you can't, but I can. Because for the big one, yes, the big first prize is an all-expenses-paid trip for 2 to London, England on British Airways. Yes, this fabulous trip is 7 days, 6 nights, including round-trip coach airfare and accommodation. That's double occupancy. That's double occupancy at the Hyde Park Hotel. And you'll receive $1,000 to spend as you choose. Okay, if most of you haven't got to grips with the answers, then watch this outstanding movie again. If you haven't worked out the rules, then get a grip on yourself and see your participating dealer or retail outlet. And if you haven't worked out how to use a 3-iron out of a bunker, change your grip.